Ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good evening. First item on the agenda is reports of city officers, and we'll start out by comments by mayor. I have several things on my agenda, and I'm going to go through them. First is a resolution of sympathy for former Mayor Bruce Macfarlane, and I'd like to read that if I could. Whereas on behalf of the City of Lake Forest, the City Council expresses its sadness at the profound loss of Bruce M. Macfarlane on July 15, 2013. And whereas Bruce Macfarlane was a longtime and valued resident of Lake Forest, and whereas Bruce Macfarlane served as mayor of Lake Forest from 1969 through 1970, and during which time led efforts to manage Dutch elm disease, a devastating tree blight in Lake Forest, and a subsequent tree replacement program. And whereas Bruce Macfarlane, prior to being elected mayor, served as an alderman, ward chairman, and on the Lake Forest caucus. And whereas Bruce Macfarlane, a beloved husband for 63 years to Barbara King Macfarlane, loving father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. And whereas Bruce Macfarlane was a graduate of the Chicago Latin School, the Hill School in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and Princeton University. And whereas before making Lake Forest his home, Bruce Macfarlane served in the U.S. Navy from 1942 to 1946 during World War II. And whereas Bruce Macfarlane, an avid athlete, won the Onwentsia Golf Club Championship twice in 1958 and 1983, 25 years apart, and traveled worldwide to play golf with friends. And whereas Bruce Macfarlane was a kind and gentle man who deeply loved his faith, his community, and fellow residents. His contributions to Lake Forest were significant, and he will truly be missed. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council that its deepest sympathy goes out to his wife, Barbara, and her family. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none, the motion is adopted. Thank you very much. The next item is another resolution of sympathy. This one, where on behalf of the City of Lake Forest, the City Council expresses its sadness at the profound loss of Mary Barb Johnson on July 19, 2013. And whereas Mary Barb Johnson was a civic-minded and valued resident of Lake Forest, serving as an alderman, chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and on the Lake Forest Library Board. And whereas Mary Barb Johnson was the first woman trustee of Lake Forest Hospital, also serving on the Women's Board of the University of Chicago, Northwestern University, and Lake Forest College, as well as on the Illinois Health Facilities Planning Board and the Federal Defenders Program in Chicago. And whereas Mary Barb Johnson was a beloved wife, loving mother, and grandmother. Whereas Mary Barb Johnson was a true community leader, both locally and nationally. Her contributions to Lake Forest were significant, and she will truly be missed. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council that its deepest sympathy goes out to her family. May I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Of all the things I get to do as mayor, one of the things I find the most enjoyable to do is what we're going to do right now. We're going to swear in 3 new police officers. So could I ask Officer Bellino, Stringer, and Marcus to come up front, please? I feel very safe right now. All right, gentlemen, could I ask you to raise your right hand and repeat after me? I state your name.
I,
Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the constitutions of the United States
and will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Illinois,
and the state of Illinois,
and will diligently enforce the laws of the state of Illinois
and will diligently enforce the laws of the state of Illinois
and the city of Lake Forest,
and the city of Lake Forest.
and that I will faithfully execute the duties
I will faithfully execute the duties
of a police officer
of a police officer
to the best of my knowledge and ability.
to the best of my knowledge and ability.
Congratulations, gentlemen. Welcome.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Gentlemen, welcome. It's great to have you be a part of the department. All right, a couple of other items on my agenda this evening. I just want to read a brief acknowledgement that I think is important. After 60 years of service to Lake Forest and surrounding communities, Joytime Preschool closed its doors for the last time on June 8th. Following the passing of the founding couple, Jay and Earl Hodgkin, the preschool continued under the leadership of their daughter, Kathleen, for the last several years, until the final school bell rang earlier this summer. The founders, Joy and Earl, met as students at Lake Forest College, and their family began growing along with the evolution of the iconic Little White Schoolhouse by South Park. For decades, Joytime was a well-known and loved institution in our town. We wish all the best to retiring Joytime director Kathleen and the rest of the Hodgkin family. Thank you. 2 other items. On Saturday, there was a really exciting event that took place at Forest Park. We had the groundbreaking for the improvements and the renovation of Forest Park. The work that will be done initially will be infrastructure work, and then we'll continue on through the balance of next year doing additional work to really revitalize the park. It was an exciting day. It was a perfect day to be out there. We had lovely weather. And the exciting thing about it as well was that the Forest Park Corporation actually announced that they had achieved more than 50% of their fundraising goal. So they're targeting $3.1 million. As of Saturday, and perhaps that's even gotten better by now, they've raised $1.6 million. So it's an exciting time. I would ask you if you'd care to view their website and even consider making a contribution, no matter how small. It is forestparkprojectcorporation.com. Go to their website, check it out, and I would encourage you to certainly get involved if you're able to. And my last comment is, don't forget, one of my favorite days of the year, Wednesday, is Lake Forest Day. So we'll see everyone at the parade and look forward to some, hopefully, keep our fingers crossed and have some great weather. Those are my comments. Next item on the agenda, comments by City Manager Bob Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My first comment is that when I walked into the council chambers here this evening, I saw a familiar face. Dan's father, Tom Marcus, is a colleague, a city manager. Actually, he's in Iowa City, Iowa right now. And so I would say, Chief Held, if he ever gets out of line, let me know and I'll call his dad and tell him about that. There's been a lot of conversation in the community over the last week or two about why we have a sprinkling ban. It hasn't been that hot. It's rained occasionally. Why are we having this problem? Why can't I just sprinkle whenever I want? So we thought that it would be worthwhile to bring together Mike Thomas and his crew, along with Kirk Volkman, who, for those of you that were not able to attend the last community engagement meeting, was an excellent community engagement meeting that talked about our water, where it comes from, where it goes, and we've merged the two in a little presentation for you in the community this evening about why the ban's in place, and then more importantly, what are some of the things that are on the horizon for this council and the community to talk about as we go forward. So, Mike?
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. This evening we will present a review on how we got here with our water irrigation ban, some background on our water plant, things that we're going to be looking into. We briefed the Public Works Committee back on July 15th, and as you well know, different signs and publications have come out issuing the ban. So a very simple background on our water plant. Our water plant was put into service in 2004. We chose to go with ultrafiltration, which you can see on this chart. The membrane modules, we have 192 filter modules down at the water plant. Each module has 35,000 polymer acetate fibers that remove the various things you see on this chart. Everything basically from bacteria, viruses, etc., everything down to a 0.01 micron. These membranes physically remove that material. So as we stressed back in 2001 when we began the design, when we began construction in 2002, the absolute overall quality of this water plant is A+ 24/7, 365. We are getting absolute phenomenal water every day, every minute of the year. So that has never changed one bit since we put the plant into operation. A little background as far as irrigation and pool permits, beginning in FY '99 compared to the current fiscal year. We have added an additional 1,460 permits. 1,124 of those are for irrigation, 336 are for pool. When we were studying the size of our water plant, what it should be, we took into account the various empty lots that were in Lake Forest and assumed that they would at some point put irrigation systems in. We did not necessarily give a significant credence for irrigation systems for existing parcels. So part of this number, obviously, and we can work with community development to break out how many of those are actually new parcels versus existing. But our bottom line with this slide is to simply show the increase in the number of irrigation systems. This chart's a little more difficult to read, but what we wanted to show you were the various colors representing various fiscal years beginning in 2010. These are average monthly production. So if we take a production and we divide it obviously by the number of days in a month, this is what we are showing for production. You can obviously see the trends during the summertime. It increases, but there's a direct correlation to the amount of water we filter and supply to the residents based on the number of days we receive rain. If we have heavy rain or periodic rain every 2 or 3 days like we have had this year, our pumpage is much lower as compared to years similar to last. This next chart shows, and again, I apologize for the small numbers, our daily historical production. Again, looking at the years of 2012 and 2013, and you can again see the significant difference, and when we compare the same day from last year as compared to the same day this year. So our average potable water supply that we provide to the residents is approximately 3.5 to 4 million gallons a day. Last year, that went all the way up to 12 million, if not higher, at points. We were at that rate. So we have upwards, not necessarily close to 200% increase, but during the peak periods of the summer, we do produce a lot of water. Many residents have asked, why did we put the ban on? And the ban was because of algae, and we'll show some pictures here in a few minutes, that affected our filtering system. The algae was created by heavy rainfall this past spring and summer. That rainfall obviously had fertilizers that had high phosphorus content. That material gets into the lake. The lake itself, over the past 15 or 20 years, has actually cleaned itself. So the sunlight going down to the lake, it reaches the bottom much easier than it did 30 years ago when it was a much more dirty lake. Plus the phosphorus, you have heavier algae blooms. Those algae blooms come into our two intakes and would clog what are pre-filters. We want to try and do our best to make sure anything such as algae or any other heavier materials don't make it to the membrane modules. That's exactly what the pre-filters are there for, is to catch material like this. Problem is, we were getting so much of it, we couldn't get a high quantity of water through the pre-filters, therefore we couldn't filter high quantities of water. So 3 million gallons, 2013, that was about a week ago. That was our lowest. The same time last year, we were pumping 11 million gallons. Again, last year, we didn't have any algae problems. Just a couple of different pictures. If we start with the one actually on the lower left, that shows our 4 Aviad pre-filters. The picture on the top left, we actually had divers come in this past week to do a routine inspection and clean out the intakes of any sand, and that actually is a picture of all the algae that has grown on and in the actual intake pipes. On the right-hand side, you can see pictures of the accumulated algae that have basically covered up those pre-filters and what has limited our ability to produce and filter higher quantities of water. This next chart, again, very interesting. And I want to take a minute just to explain. On the left side is our actual elevation in the booster station. So we refer to the booster station as across from West Campus at Wesley and Waukegan. That is where we store, I believe it's approximately 4 million gallons of water. We have another 1.5 million gallons in the air out at the water tower at Route 60, and we have another 1 million gallons down at the water plant. So as you can see during the day, we are doing our best, and this is the cyclical nature of our water plant. We do our best to build up that booster station to fill it up during the day. We usually have it filled by mid to late afternoon. We then close off the valve to the booster station and work on filling up our water tower. And then beginning around 10 p.m. or so, 10:30, we begin to see a decline. What is interesting to us, and if you look at both of these, around 12:30, we have a significant demand in this city. Irrigation systems come on, and we see our water tower drop significantly. We see our booster station. We have 2 pumps. We turn the first one on. During high irrigation demand periods, pump 1 can't handle it, so we turn on pump 2. At the same time, we're filtering as much water and pumping as much as we can out of our water plant. So we're coming at the system 3 different ways. That is why it's so important during the day. We need residents and different private owners to shut off so we can build our supplies back up. The sprinkling ban timeline, just a quick review. In early June, we noticed the presence of algae growing in and around our intakes as well as throughout Lake Michigan. Again, something unique to our water plant because of the filters that we have. If you take a look at other North Shore plants, Kenilworth, Glencoe, Winnetka, they have very traditional sand filter water plants. The algae affects those water plants with taste and odor issues. Doesn't affect ours. As you could see one of our first slides, that's one of the benefits of the membranes, is that it pulls out that algae and it pulls out those taste and odor issues. But our plant, because of the membrane modules and the way we chose to proceed as far as filtering water, the algae has an impact on our plant. So again, the algae was in Lake Michigan beginning in May and early June. July 11th, we published our news release to urge residents to have greater participation in the odd-even watering restrictions. Again, that's something that the Illinois Department of Natural Resource asks all towns to do, is to adhere to an odd-even schedule from May 15th through September 15th. July 15th, we opened up our interconnects with Lake Bluff to assist in providing us with some additional water. July 24th, we enacted a total sprinkling ban. And then on July 30th, we lifted the ban and have gone back to the odd even. The questions obviously have been raised on what are we, the city, doing short term. We are doing our best to communicate the annual water restrictions to property owners throughout town. We sent letters last Friday, to irrigation owners, again reminding them of the odd even and please asking them to adhere, as well as trying to do our best to explain this algae issue. We met with irrigation companies last week to solicit ideas on how irrigation systems work, or they may be able to work better as far as water sensors, timers, et cetera. And then, as we noted, we had hired divers last week to inspect our two intakes, a 42 and a 24-inch intake. Both are approximately 3,300 feet out in the lake at about 28 feet deep. This is an interesting picture. I won't name the location of it, but it was today at 2:30. Difficult to see, but we have one of our odd even signs, and right next to it, the sprinklers are going wide open. Long term, what are we doing at the water plant? We are going to do an internal capacity study to take a look at what is our physical ability down at the water plant to expand it, if that is one of the recommendations, and if City Council so chooses to go that route. Physically, how could we do it? How much more could we filter down at the water plant, and what would the expense be? We're also going to study our pre-filters a little bit better to see if there is a different way where we can catch this algae, possibly at our intake wells, and clean those more frequently before they hit the pre-filters. But again, it's simply an idea that we're investigating. Algae cutters in our intake wells. As we all know, the Deer Path Golf Course is studying the potential and the feasibility of a water well. And then one thing we will be looking at this fall at your November budget meeting is the idea of proposing a different rate structure for watering. Basically an idea where we would, with a base rate, try to cover all of our operational and capital expenses, and then in addition to that, based on the amount of water you use, the higher amount you use, the more you pay per thousand. Somewhat of an incremental rate. Simply an idea, but again, when we look at that water fund, it's paying for sanitary sewers, it's paying for all your water main infrastructure, it's paying for all the water plant infrastructure. If we sell water, then we have the ability the following year to invest in some of these improvements. But there's a significant infrastructure the city has to maintain, and it's all based on the sale of water. So we want to relook at that and see if there's another way we can address that issue. One other chart, lake levels, very interesting. Really, what this has showed from, I believe it was 1960 to 2013, is that the lake would rebound in years. The challenge came in 1999, where it dropped significantly and has not returned to its average levels. So again, that's just a point of interest for all of us that yes, the lake levels are declining. There are more towns out west of us that are looking to and actually have received approval to acquire water from Lake Michigan. So it's a supply of water that obviously we all need to respect and appreciate. IDNR, Department of Natural Resources allocation. They provide allocations to every municipality. You can see up there our 2009 allocation was 4.324. That is million gallons per day. So we pump on average about 1.3, 1.4 billion gallons per year divided by 365. You will see then what our allocation. Our allocation each year goes up, and you can see what we have used and over the past 4 years. So from this point, I'd ask Kurt if he could come on up and talk about some ideas of things residents can do.
Thanks, Mike. Mr. Mayor, City Council members, good evening. I'm Kurt Volkman, Chairman of the Lake Forest Collaborative for Environmental Leadership, and as Bob mentioned, on July 18th, we had a community forum to discuss the question, our water, where does it come from, where does it go? And I think it was hosted by Alderman Reisenberg. I think it was a very successful meeting. We had good turnout. We had a lot of good questions, a lot of good dialogue, and Bob has asked that I join you tonight to share a little bit about some of the recommendations we made that are most relevant to freshwater. Before I do that, though, I think I'd like to take a couple minutes and explain some of the quirky things about the geology and hydrology of Lake Forest. We're kind of in a very unique situation that has implications for all of our water systems. And when I say all of our water systems, we have to think about fresh water, what we drink, what we shower with, et cetera, our sanitary, our wastewater, what we flush, what goes down our drains, et cetera, and our stormwater, what goes into our gutters, what goes down the gutters in the streets, et cetera. And unlike a lot of communities in Lake Forest, those are 3 separate systems. We have separate infrastructure for all 3 in Lake Forest. As Mike explained, our fresh water comes from Lake Michigan, two intakes that are big straws that suck it in. Our stormwater system, or excuse me, our sanitary system, when we flush, everything in Lake Forest goes to a big pipe that's under Highway 41, makes its way down to the North Shore Sanitary District Treatment Plant in Highland Park, where the water is treated. It empties into the Skokie River, which joins up with the Chicago River, and due to the wisdom of our forefathers in the turn of the century, last century, the Chicago River now feeds into the Illinois River, which goes to the Mississippi River, which goes to the Gulf of Mexico. So think about that. Everything we flush in Lake Forest eventually makes its way to the Gulf of Mexico. Another quirky thing is Green Bay Road. Green Bay Road is the natural divider between the Great Lakes Basin and the Mississippi River Basin. What does that mean? That means that a drop of rainwater that lands west of Green Bay Road eventually makes its way to the Mississippi River in the Gulf of Mexico. A drop of water that lands east of Green Bay Road makes its way through our ravines into Lake Michigan. Okay? So given those oddities of our water systems, I'd like to just discuss quickly 5 of the 10 recommendations we discussed at the July 18th meeting, starting with the first one that's most relevant tonight, and that is please follow the water restrictions. If you don't know what they are, we're currently on the odd-even program, which simply means that if your street address has an odd number in it, you are allowed to water before 10 a.m. or after 8 p.m. on odd calendar days. If you have an even address, like me, I live on 290 Vine Avenue, I'm allowed to water on even calendar days. And as Mike explained, we were recently in a complete ban of any irrigation at all, and it's critically important because we have system capacity constraints that Mike explained that everybody adheres to those restrictions. Secondly, think about the fertilizers and pesticides that you use on your property. We're not saying don't use them at all, but use them prudently. As I explained, if you live east of Green Bay Road, any excess fertilizer or pesticide that you put on your lawn that is flushed via rain into the storm system makes its way untreated through our ravines into Lake Michigan, which is our drinking water supply. West of Green Bay Road, any excess makes its way eventually to the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico. Again, we're not saying don't use any, use it wisely. Increasingly, landscaping companies are offering organic options, which is a good thing to consider as well. Thirdly, use green infrastructure where you can, and that's a kind of an overused term, but basically it's anything that keeps the rainwater where it lands. So that includes rain barrels, rain gardens, native plants, trees, permeable surfaces for your driveway. Again, the idea is to minimize the runoff, minimize the flow through our ravines into Lake Michigan on the east side of town, and minimize the runoff to the Gulf of Mexico on the west side of town. Fourthly, install water sense fixtures. Not many people have heard of water sense, but you might have heard of Energy Star. Energy Star is the EPA's program to label energy efficient appliances. Water sense is the same thing for water efficient fixtures, and irrigation controllers. So you can buy a WaterSense toilet or a faucet. More importantly, you can buy a WaterSense irrigation controller, which, unlike traditional irrigation controllers, just has a clock where you set the intervals and the days that you want to water. A WaterSense fixture is like a thermostat. It recognizes soil moisture, it recognizes humidity, and it really only waters when your plants need it. Experts say more than 50% of the water that's used for irrigation is wasted because it's not needed. And because we have a significant problem of peak water usage due to irrigation in Lake Forest, WaterSense fixtures and WaterSense controllers make a lot of sense. And lastly, fix indoor and outdoor leaks. It's kind of a no-brainer. A leaky toilet will waste 2 gallons of water a minute, which can add up to hundreds of dollars on your bill. And it's a lot of waste of the great water that Mike explained. The rest of the recommendations I'm not going to go through since we're not going to spend much more time on this. If you're interested in the remaining 5, if you're interested in hearing more about what we discussed at the Water Forum on July 18th, the presentation is now posted on the city's website. I'm told the video of the entire hour-and-a-half meeting will be available tomorrow. Before I step down, I just want to make one final comment. Most people don't think about water, or if we do, we take it for granted. In fact, 70% of the world's surface is covered with water. But the reality is only 1% of that water is usable by humans. The rest is salt water, or it's tied up in glaciers and ice caps. We're fortunate to live near 20% of that usable fresh water in the form of the Great Lakes. But as Mike showed you, Lake Michigan water levels are declining. And the Great Lakes are under tremendous stress from rising temperatures, invasive species, and a wide variety of pollutants. The demand for fresh water in the world is expected to increase by 50% in the next 20 years. It's critically important for everyone to realize that we have a finite supply of fresh water. And it's our responsibility to be good stewards for future generations of this precious resource. Thank you. Questions?
There's such a thing as a centrifuge for spinning out that bloom algae before it gets into our filters?
I am not sure. We will look at algae cutters that will reduce the actual size of the algae as it comes in. We'll also look at adding some of these pre-filter screens, these 200 or 300 micron screens in our intakes. But we need to study the feasibility behind all of this, simply because not only the cost and not only the operational aspect of it, but will it hinder how much water coming into the plant? If we're at a 4 or 5 million gallon rate, that's one story. If we're at a 12 or 13 million gallon rate, it's a different story. So that's one of the things we're going to be looking into is some other way of trying to handle and modify this algae. There could be something out there.
Yeah, I was just curious if there's some kind of mechanical device so that we don't get the clogs.
Yeah.
When you get the pre-filters that are clogged, do you have to replace the filters or do you wash them off? What do you do?
The Aviad pre-filters that we showed actually were not meant for us to take apart when they were installed, but we learned and figured out on our own how to take them apart. And we've got it down now to about an hour and a half of taking them apart, bring the screens outside, power wash them, put them back together, and they're back in service. So we handle that ourselves.
I have a question on what other communities might be doing when you had your big hour-and-a-half meeting. That was other different communities getting together, or?
Different communities for
Community engagement meeting, they were.
Oh, the community, I'm sorry, that engagement, I'm sorry, I thought there was another. Do you know what other communities might be doing to enforce water bans, and or do people in Arizona have a different technique to make sure that, there doesn't,
right.
On my street, there's a complete disregard for, it's raining in a water ban and the sprinklers are going off. And you just drive down the street shaking your head and there's nothing, all there is a sign. It doesn't appear to be any.
Right.
The police have, just kidding.
Last year, we did go ahead and ask the police to issue tickets. We had all of our city employees, if they saw irrigation systems being used at the wrong time, they would let us know as well as the police, and the police were issuing tickets. But we have not gone after them aggressively this year.
Can we, when, when you hook up your water connection now, you have to hook up a big enough pipe, I think, to have a future residential sprinkler system. Is that why the
Inch and a half.
inch and a half
water
pipe?
service.
Is it, when we issue new permits, can we require these smart, I mean, is there something we can do with the ordinances or
I
something
believe
to?
we can. I believe we can require the things that
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 require,
Kurt
would that
noted.
mean that somebody here would have to kind of ask for that to
Sure.
get rolling, and then it would go to the appropriate board and commissioner, come back here?
Yeah, I assume it's something we can
Process
simply
works.
write into our building code.
Building code.
Yes.
And one of the realizations we've come to is that, I said this before, a lot of people just don't think about this. And when it comes to watering your grass, there's a lot of residents in town that have outsourced that to a landscape company. Landscape company doesn't pay your water bill. Landscape company is incented to keep everything green and lush, and they'll use as much water as they need to do that. So if you're one of those residents, I would encourage you to get engaged, understand the settings on your sprinkler system, understand what you're paying for water and the implications, and just understand what's going on. It's the first step.
Mike, just simple question, simple problem. If the algae is clogging our intakes, is there any possibility of just increasing the circumference of the head of the intake so there's a greater area drawing?
Well, the algae is actually clogging our pre-filters. So installing a larger size diameter intake would cost a good amount of money, and I actually don't think it would address the issue. We would still inevitably bring in this algae if it was near our intakes. It's not to say that algae has been around our intakes 24/7, 365. These blooms are floating out in the lake, and if they get by our intake, they get sucked in. Probably about 7 or 8 days ago, we had a strong wind out of the north, and when the temperatures dropped down to 60 or 70, that really turned the lake up, and I think that's why things began to become better for us, because it stirred that algae up, it pushed a lot of it to the south. So that's the issue.
Thanks.
There will be a lot more conversation before the Public Works Committee and the City Council on this, as Mike said, whether it's mechanical enhancements and improvements at the water plant or rate structures and so forth. So we just wanted to make sure that we got this word out there to help educate the public both about the restrictions and in fact why this algae problem was creating such problems for us down at the water plant. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Kurt. At the risk of now talking about a topic that we talk about sprinkling bans and Commonwealth Edison and major storms coming and knocking power out to the city of Lake Forest, we're going to have our annual report from the ComEd External Affairs Manager, James Dudek, about what's going on in the city of Lake Forest and investments that ComEd is making with its infrastructure in the city of Lake Forest. So, James?
Good evening, Mayor and the City Council. Thank you for inviting me back. I'd like to present today the ComEd Annual Report for 2012 to the City of Lake Forest. There we go. Tonight, we'll talk about some reliability metrics as they relate to the city. I want to talk about some electrical system improvements we've made in 2012. There is some 2013 work going on in the city, electric grid modernization work. Touch briefly on smart meter deployment and just reinforce ComEd's communication channels. There we go. This first charts that you're looking at are basically our frequency index of outages. We refer to an acronym called SAIFI, which is a System Average Index, Interruption Frequency Index. 5 columns on each side of the chart. The charts on the left indicate a 365-day snapshot of our system compared to the chart on the right, which excludes storms. Looking at 2012's performance, the column on the far right of each of those respective charts, you'll see some numbers above there. The number of 1.22 is on average, each of our customers in Lake Forest had 1.22 outages during the year of 2012. Considerably better than the 2011 year with all the storms. Getting back to the range of where we were prior to the 2011 storm, within that number, there was one instance that we had a transmission incident back in July at one of our stations. One of those lines feeds about 2,500 customers within the city here. The breaker had an issue. The controller had to open up the breaker to alleviate the problem. That was about a 9-minute outage affecting about 2,500 customers. So that component of that one particular event accounts for 0.32 of that 1.22 index, or more than 25%. And that's typically that's what we refer to as an anomaly. So without that transmission incident, you know, that 1.16 number, excuse me, the 1.22 number would have dropped to 0.9, which gets us into a declining trend there. On the right-hand side, again, non-storm, kind of the same type of data that you're looking at. 1.13 is the average index. You'll see a value there with some arrows. Those are system average. So that 1.16 on the left-hand side indicates the ComEd system average for interruptions during a 365-day scenario. On the right-hand side, non-storm 0.80. Here's our next set of metrics. This is basically your duration index, how long the outages last. So again, looking at CAIDI, CAIDI, the acronym we use, on the right side, left side, 365 days a year, right side, excluding the storms. 2012, best year ComEd has had in the last 5 years in terms of length of outages. 71 minutes is the average length of an outage that occurred last year. System average was 196, and that was during all 365 days of the year. If you look on the right-hand side, you know, non-storm components, 83 was the system average. City of Lake Forest, 73 minutes to restore an outage. So a nice improvement, nice metrics in terms of looking over the past 5 years of history. Kind of a busy chart, I apologize for this, but this is our interruption by cause. It lists all the years that you saw on the previous slides, but what I want to illustrate is basically that towards the center of the page, right to the right, you'll see a column there. It's entitled TNS. That was the one transmission incident that I spoke of. You'll see that purple color bar there, raise up there. There's your component was 0.32. As you can see, in none of the previous years, there was no TNS or transmission and substation incidents occurring within the city. So that definitely, we're attributing that to that breaker as basically an anomaly on our system. Nice trend on tree-related outages. 5 years of history there. We're seeing definitely a decline in tree-related outages. Underground equipment trending in a positive direction as far as less outages with the underground. Weather in 2010, and the far column on the far right. Weather obviously in 2011 was a big impact. Weather in the 2012 time frame. Even though there wasn't storms, there was plenty of heat. Electrical system improvements. Here's what we've been doing during 2012. Distribution automation devices. We refer to these as smart switches. You may see some of these structures. I put a couple snapshots, some photos underneath towards the bottom of the page. Basically, each of these devices will open on loss of voltage or detection of a fault. What it basically does is it attempts to heal the system on its own. So that in the old scenario, when a circuit breaker would operate at a station, all the customers would be out of service. In this case, you install smart switches along that same circuit, it begins to isolate or section off those customers that are, that have the problem associated with them, and keeping the remaining customers in service. On circuit Charlie, as we refer to the nomenclature C, Charlie 046 Yankee, installed two distribution automation devices last year, completed in May of 2012. Another improvement that we are rapidly employing as another storm hardening type of solution. We refer to this as spacer cable or Hendrix cable. Illustration there in the lower right-hand corner. Basically, is a compact scenario as far as how you see the wires. The very, very top of that wire, we refer to it as a messenger wire. That wire is under tremendous pressure between poles. It may carry 3,000 to 4,000 square feet of pressure on there. And so it's a very tight, very hard surface, you know, when touched or bounced on. The three black other cables, the cables you see under there, are the conductors. These are insulated cables. And the tight time frame, or I should say the tight scenario, the packaging of this is more of a diamond shape setup. We're starting to use this in the more heavily wooded areas where we've encountered a lot of tree contact, a lot of trees that are susceptible to limbs that are breaking off, etc. The theory behind here is, as the definition says, an overhead installation of covered bundled primary wire that can withstand tree branches and small tree contact. This will not, a big oak tree falling on this is not going to save the system. It's going to bring it down. But you get some tree limbs that are breaking off and branches. This system is proven already itself in our service territory, where that branch or that limb will bounce off that top messenger wire because it's under such high tension, and it'll bounce clear, and it won't cause outages. So this is again another solution that we're looking at in spot areas where vegetation is heavy. Last year, 2 circuits. There was one circuit, Alpha 6618, 3,544 feet of spacer cable installed, completed in May 2012. And then the second circuit there, 641 feet, completed in April.
Excuse me, could you tell us where circuit A6618, where is that? I mean, are these in Lake Forest?
It is in Lake Forest. I do have a map. I didn't bring it with me. I can get you that.
I'm just curious, you know, if it'd be helpful for us to know at some point.
I can amend the report to give the neighborhoods or the locations, and then get it back to you.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
Am I correct, the top wire doesn't conduct electricity? It's just structural?
Correct. Yes. That top wire there that you saw, yeah, at the very top, it's actually the ground wire for the system. But it serves the purpose of grounding the system, and then second of all, the purpose is, more importantly, is to resist any type of debris falling on top of that structure. Another type of device we have in our storm hardening toolkit is what we call a trip saver device. Right now, in the year 2012, we've installed 8 of these trip saver devices. These replace fuses that you'll normally see going into neighborhoods and off of our overhead system. The beauty of the trip saver fuse is it's a smart fuse. It's a fuse that will auto reset for transient faults. You know, these are faults that are caused by branches bouncing off wires or when trees brush up against the wires in the old scenario. Old scenario, tree brushes up against the wire, it sends a short circuit, fuse expires, it's like your circuit breaker in your home. It trips open because you've had a short circuit. What this device does, same scenario, tree brushes up against it, the device itself is starting to, the microprocessor is thinking, is this a real fault? Is the wire really down? Or is there a real problem downstream, or was it just something that brushed up against the system? So it will open itself. It will open electronically, turn the power off for about 10 seconds, and then it will turn itself back on. It will heal itself and turn the system back on. If it was in fact just a transient or a tree branch that bounced off, it's in the clear. Everybody in that section of cable or section of circuit will get their power restored. Albeit a 10-second, 15-second interruptions, and maybe some flickering goes on as the device is operating properly, but it is avoiding a long-term outage. Underground residential cable. This is we refer to this as our URD cable. We began in 2012 installing quite a bit of new underground cable. Right here, you're seeing installations in some of the locations there at 1060 Lake Street, or excuse me, 1060 Lake Road. 675 feet of new cable installed in April of 2012. Again, another 3,675 feet at 1,000 Havenwood Lane, completed in March in 2012. 448 feet at somewhere in the vicinity of 1089 Evergreen Drive, completed in April of 2012. The system itself, comprised of a lot of underground cable. There's a replacement program or a refurbishment program. A refurbishment program is where we're able to inject a silicone-based substance into the cable while it's energized, and this silicone substance travels the length of the cable between two transformers, and it hardens after a period of time. The new hardening, when the silicone liquid hardens and it finally becomes solid, it provides a brand new insulation value to the cable. The manufacturer of the process guarantees a 20-year life expectancy after the process. We've been using it now for years, and it's reacting and it's servicing very well in the system. So there are some caveats to when you can use that. You can't use that on all installations of underground equipment. If there has been a break in the cable somewhere, and we've mended that break throughout the years, the substance does not get through that joint, as we call it, that part of that point of correction. So there's an option where you can dig that up and put a new joint in there to allow the process to continue, or you just go ahead and replace the cable. In our analysis, if there's more than one or two replacement joints in there, it's not worth the labor and the expense to dig it up and replace. We would just come in with some with a brand new cable. And then finally, no picture here, but overhead to underground conversion. This was a great job that we worked with the city on and converted about 4,000 feet of cable in the Illinois, McKinley, Washington area. We converted that from overhead to URD, and that was completed in May of 2012. 2013, here's what we got going. For the most part, a lot of URD cable going into the city here. We've planned for and scheduled more than 28,700 feet of underground residential cable to either be replaced or refurbished. Right now, over 25,000 feet of that planned amount has been installed. Looks like we got two more jobs there at the very bottom. 30 East Deer Path Road, 210 to 250 Vine Avenue, still waiting to execute on those jobs. But considerable amount of cable work done in 2013. Wanted to talk a little bit about smart meter deployment. We've gotten to the point where the company has a plan and a deployment schedule. As we stated previously, smart grid, smart meter is what the total investment that ComEd promises to all its communities. When we signed into law back in 2011, the Electric Infrastructure Modernization Act, $2.6 billion total expenditure. The issues that I talked about up front with all the storm hardening and the new equipment going in, ComEd was spending $1.3 billion of that total amount on that portion of our system. Here comes the other $1.3 billion in terms of the smart meter deployment. Every one of our 4 million customers will receive a smart meter, one in every home and business. This would give some of the benefits here: enhanced outage identification and restoration. No longer will the customer have to call ComEd and report outages. These will all be connected on a live grid. It's monitored constantly by our control centers. Kind of what you see, what you would imagine is what you're going to get. We're going to have control panels that you're going to be seeing a lot of green indicators on the control panels as they go over our service territory. Once an outage occurs, those green dots turn to red. And then our dispatchers receive alarms and alerts right on their scopes as they're working in their territories, and they can start to analyze and isolate just what's going on the system. If there's no self-healing or switches that can be operated to get those customers back in service, more effectively they can start sending the troublemen pinpointing to that area to restore outages in a much quicker time frame. Another enhancement here, another benefit I should say, is improved meter reading and billing efficiencies. All the meters will be read electronically, so the accuracy and the efficiencies will be much greater. Reducing electric theft, that will be a thing that is going to be more easy for a ComEd to deal with, only because they'll be able to turn the meters on and off remotely, rather than going to the site to pull the meters to disconnect power. And there's a few other enhancements there. Deployment schedule for the Libertyville Operating Center, which Lake Forest, the city of Lake Forest, is servicing out of year 2019 and 2020. And then finally, I just wanted to, I know I shared this slide last time I was here, but power of self-service. Interesting trends at ComEd. Most of our customers in the past like to call our number and talk to a live CSR, a customer service representative. Last year, or for the last 3 years, the company has seen an actual decline in the amount of calls we take where a customer still wants to talk to a customer service representative. It's down to around the 47% of all of our calls taken. A customer still wants to talk to a customer service rep. You got the computer-activated, the voice response unit, as we call it. That's when you're prompted to touch different keypads on your phone. That's actually gone up. While the CSRs has gone down, the usage on the VRU has gone up, and we're at about 52% with that. But the most interesting part of the whole scenario is that through mobile applications and the different social medias, we've already performed in the year 2012 over 1 million transactions as a company with those type of with those devices. So clearly, as more of these mobile applications and these devices are getting out there, more people are adapting to them and are communicating with ComEd with that as an effective way to view their bill, take action on their billing, pay their bill, look for outage information, receive automatic outage information from ComEd, et cetera. So a lot of exciting things going on there. And that's it. I will ask for questions.
I had a question.
Sure.
First of all, it's nice to see you so relaxed. In 2011, I know you were.
Thank you.
And it was a little redder. You're a little tenser.
I might be a little grayer, but
grayer. But one of the things that we hear up here is I'm glad the city has a great average of very few outages, but my neighborhood, and then they go on to talk about, and this is obviously reflecting back on 2011 more than anything. Mm-hmm. But when we look at these statistics, is there a way for us to look at the worst thing that happened in Lake Forest as well, just to see the household or neighborhood that got impacted the most, so we get an idea of, when you're doing your presentation, just to show that it's not a favorable statistic, it never will be, of course, but it would give us some end of the rainbow sort of perspective. It's just a request for the next time or the time after. I think it would be helpful, because we never hear from the people that have below average outages, and the other people feel like they've just been glossed over from time to time. I haven't heard any problems this year, but we never get that number.
Interesting enough, Alderman, we do have that data, and we do share it in our complete annual report. It gets into more depth there. If you wanted me to talk for about an hour, hour and 15 minutes, I could go through the entire report, but in essence of time, we tried to condense to, to the high levels of what is actually occurring here in the city. And in instances, and working with city staff with high volume, or I should say high frequency outages, we have a whole team of reliability engineers, similar to what we did in 2011 after a lot of those storms came through. They blitzed the area. We work and we listen to all of your concerns as you feed those into the city staff and to Mr. Kiley and Ms. Walters, and they communicate regularly with us. Where we go out there, we do the due diligence. We go ahead and we recommend the corrections, and then we wait to hear feedback. And usually,
People have been happy with the response. I think I would, just as one person up here, I would just like to know how much better the worse is getting from time to time. It would give us some useful tools when we talk to
I'll
people.
remember to incorporate that
Yeah,
on
I don't
the
need-
next
I don't
on the
wanna
next
do
report.
the whole report.
It's a good idea. It's a good idea. Yeah, part of the report here is it's not all all the rosy stuff. You gotta blend in what's not going well too.
I don't think we've had a power outage in our neighborhood in memory. I've lived there 18 years.
There's a kiss of death.
Sorry, Dennis.
Got a lot of wood around here to knock on.
My neighbors is here too, so that's.
Actually, I do have a question, and storms are kind of relative. The graph notes that the majority of outages are really caused by tree falling, falls that are storm-related, violent storm, but we have a different type of storm with the emerald ash borer. And curious just to know how, ComEd, how you're dealing with that threat. Trees on private properties, are you gonna be removing any of them involuntarily that are gonna threaten your power lines?
And can I jump in here? Because I was going to ask the exact question. I actually have some ash trees on my property that will eventually need to be removed. And one of them is right next to power line. And when I called my tree removal service, they told me to call ComEd. And when I called ComEd, they said that they would need to turn off power for my neighborhood when they remove this tree. When the tree is removed. And obviously that'll be something that I'll want to notify my neighbors about. It'll be an inconvenience to my neighbors when it happens. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has, who's in this situation. And I'm wondering if you've had any discussion about this or given any thought to coordinating perhaps some effort.
We have. ComEd has begun the process of putting a strategy together to deal with just the volume of trees that are going to be infested with the EAB and resulting will have to come down. The strategy is kind of work in progress at this point because there's really no base. There's no baseline across the nation. We've gone to other cities. It seems that the EAB outbreak started somewhere in the Detroit area, the Michigan area there, and it's starting to kind of grow from that point outward. So we've talked to Detroit Edison and other utilities that are dealing with this. Some have taken some different measures. As ComEd, we perform all year long. We perform tree trimming on all of the circuits. Every circuit in our service territory. All 5,800 circuits will get tree trimmed once every 4 years from end to end. In the instance of Detroit Edison, and they don't have as many feeders as ComEd, but they're a substantial utility. They have suspended that type of tree trimming program to deal with just the amount of EAB trees as they're trying to remove those from their power line, the proximity of their power lines. Again, we're listening to our municipalities. Ironically enough, we had a meeting. We had a strategy meeting just this week, or I should say late last week. We met with your city staff and your city forester. And I brought our experts out from ComEd, and we understand the challenges and the hurdles that the city has, but we like what we heard as far as the plan. To your point, as far as the communication goes. There has to be some and further tightening up of responses and scripting for our CSRs to understand exactly what the customer is asking for. And I'll just elaborate just briefly. There's several ways a customer can ask, you know, for help when they have a tree that's dying or needs to be removed around our power lines. One, they can ask ComEd to send a representative from our tree trimming crews out there and ask them, can you give me an estimate to just top the tree off, cut the tree off so it's below the high voltage lines. Then any one of your landscapers or tree removal companies that are not utility rated, you know, by OSHA standards, can come in there and remove the rest of the tree. So that's one option. Another option is you still want to use that utility company or that contractor that is not utility certified. Then you would ask for a line drop, where we would then coordinate turning off the power between two sections. We would do the notifications, you know, to all of the customers associated with that. But then we would safely turn the electricity off to the line, let that contractor go in there and do the tree removing evolution. The third thing is there are other companies that are out there that are certified as tree utility contractors, utility tree removing contractors. They're certified by OSHA standards. We use Asplin. That's our contractor of choice. That doesn't mean Asplin is the only ones that does that type of work. I know the city has asked us to share some of that information in terms of what contractors do we know that are utility rated, utility certified, so that as you get into the tree removals with the individual property owners and they're close to ComEd lines, you'll have a variety of options to utilize in terms of dealing with the removal of the tree. So long answer, just to summarize, we're putting a strategy together. We're excited to hear of what Lake Forest is doing. We want to partner with you. We need to strengthen up some of our communication channels that our customers receive when they call in and ask for this type of evolution to start. So more to come, and it'll be coming very quickly.
Thank you very much.
I've actually got a couple of questions.
Was there
George,
another
you have a
question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep. Could you go back to the chart on the outages, maybe the third, whatever, that showed Lake Forest versus your system average?
Sure. Frequency,
No,
duration?
it was the one before that, I think, yeah.
This one?
So, I mean, it seems like things are getting a little better. Lake Forest is generally about average, maybe a little below average, or I'm sorry, a little above average, which is not good. But you're comparing us to your system. So my question is, how does your system compare nationally to other systems? Because with this comparison, the system could be doing horribly, you know, on a national basis, and we'd be looking better and better all the time if we just stayed the same and your system got worse relative to others. So I'm just, you know, kind of what's the right metric here?
Right.
Are we really okay, or does it just look like we're okay because ComEd is not okay, for instance?
I believe I understand your question, Alderman, and if I'm correct, I didn't bring that metric along with me, but I believe we're in the top quartile amongst utilities in the nation, and I believe we may even be in the top decile.
Okay.
So we take this very seriously. As those metrics you see are before you, you know, of course, those are goals that we are trying to lower those numbers, those metrics. But all that work we're doing with the EIMA, the $2.6 billion investment, that's all tied to the reduction of these metrics. So if you see these metrics going in the wrong way, ComEd as a utility are going to be paying penalties on this $2.6 billion bill that was granted to us and signed by the legislators. So we get the message loud and clear, and you know our message is to reduce these metrics.
Okay. Thank you. One last question back on the emerald ash borer. So at some point, if I have a tree that's sitting right near your power line that's dead or is about to be dead, if I wait long enough, you'll come and at least take the top off?
Well, the way that we manage the trees is that you'll have a power line. Let's say you have an overhead line and it's got either a single primary wire above it or three primary wires above it. And if you're within, let's say, about a 10-foot zone on either side of that wire, ComEd will come in and we'll take care of it, we'll take that tree down, because it's a hazard to us. Where we're running into the request, and we're starting to hear from the city, is that some of these trees are huge, and they're outside of that trim zone, and we consider that on private property. But to your point, when they fall, and if they fall towards us, it's gonna fall into the power line. So the proactive measure the city wants to take, with your city forester, is that the notifying the property owners of the decline in health of the tree, and eventually it will fail. Now, it could fail the other way and fall on the structure, which is even worse, you know, the home or the business.
Right.
But that's kind of our theory behind you know, how we deal with whether we take care of it or it's something beyond our control.
I mean, some of them don't grow straight, you know, they grow up and then they take a right
yeah.
turn and go over your wires. So,
Exactly.
and they might be outside that zone. so.
Exactly, and that'll be the challenge too, because, you know, most of these well-established trees, our lines are 35, 40 feet in the air. Some of them are over, you know, they have the overhang, and as these trees decline and start to die, that overhang's gonna crack off and
They'll
go
drop
right on top of the wire,
branches and
right on top of
boughs
the
and,
wires.
right.
yeah.
So, okay, well, it's interesting. It's good to know. Thank you.
Anything else?
Anything else? Great.
Thank you very much, James.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you, Bob.
And we do have a copy of the complete report on file if anybody's interested to look at it more closely. That completes my report this evening.
Thank you, Bob, very much. Next item on the agenda is comments by council members. The intent tonight is to use this section primarily to discuss some long-term financial planning, get Elizabeth engaged a bit. We're going to move this item down so we can have a little more time at the end of the meeting after item number 6. So we're going to continue on and come back to that. Next item on the agenda, opportunity for citizens to address the council on non-agenda items. Anyone care to address the council on a non-agenda item? I think, did I see former Mayor Rummel want to address the council, or is he just stretching his legs? Okay, I guess not. All right, moving on. He missed his chance. Number 5, items for omnibus vote consideration. There are 12 of them, so you'll have to bear with me while I read these. If there are any particular item any member of the council would like to take separately, we can do that at the end. Item number 1, approval of the July 1, 11, and 15, 2013 City Council minutes. Approval of check register from June 22 to July 26, 2013. Number 3, approval of seasonal brochure printing bid. Number 4, approval of contract for annual tree planting for FY14 budget. Number 5, approval of contract for installation of holiday lights in the Central Business District and Waukegan and Everett Road berm. Number 6, adopting the June 11, 2013 amendment of Lake County Watershed Development Ordinance to remain a Lake County certified stormwater community. Number 7, award of a contract for Northcroft Park's parking lot resurfacing and bike path and Triangle Park's walking path. Number 8, consideration of ordinances approving recommendations from the Building Review Board, first reading, and if desired by the City Council, final approval. Number 9, consideration of an ordinance approving a recommendation from the Historic Preservation Commission, first reading, and if desired by the City Council, final approval. Number 10, consideration of an ordinance approving a recommendation from the Zoning Board of Appeals, first reading, and again, if desired by the Council, final approval. Number 11, award of a contract for Wedgewood lot site preparation for a single-family home development project. And number 12, dissolve the Gorton Commission. If no one likes to take any of those items separately, I'm sorry, Vic, go ahead.
I just wanted to note on page 33, which relates to your minutes from July 11th, there was a sentence missing regarding the vote. I would suggest that it be amended, or that it be approved with the amendment of adding the vote.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve all those items with that amendment?
Can I make a comment to number 4 without pulling it out? It's a budget on the tree planting, and it says the remainder amount will be used to purchase trees. And I've just never worked budgets that way. Usually you buy the trees that you plan on buying, there's a budget amount, and you're either over or under. But if we need more trees or less trees, it sounds like we're buying trees based on how much money we have left over. And if that's okay, but that's usually not a budgeting technique.
Right, well, we also bid out all the tree planting materials separately usually because we get better pricing and we get them from 5 or 7 different locations like that. So this is really for just the labor of planting them rather than the material themselves. I will verify, but I believe we're coming back to you, as we do always, with the bids, and it doesn't say precisely what kind of tree is going in what location, but basically just telling you, we've bid these out, these different species out to the different,
These remaining funds are for the purchasing of trees from multiple vendors.
right, and that's what we typically do every year. But it's, so this contractor will not be purchasing the trees, we are purchasing the trees, they're just planting the trees we purchase.
Right, so do we budget how many?
Themselves will be coming back as a separate item in the future.
Right.
Well, okay, thanks.
Any other comments? If not, I'd ask for a motion to approve the omnibus.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Biddy.
Alderman Novit,
Aye.
Alderman Waldeck.
Aye.
Alderman Moore,
Aye.
Alderman Pandaleon,
Aye.
Alderman Tack,
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg,
Aye.
Alderman Palmer,
Aye.
Alderman Adelman.
Aye.
8 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you, Biddy, very much. Next item on the agenda, category of ordinances, consideration of an ordinance approving a recommendation from the Historic Preservation Commission. Final approval. Could I ask Kathy, and she's already beat me to it, to make a couple of comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This recommendation from the Historic Preservation Commission was before you at your last meeting. At that time, you heard a presentation, you heard a fair amount of testimony, you had a significant amount of discussion, and ultimately, you approved first reading of the ordinance. The ordinance is included again in your packet. I wanted to make just a couple clarification comments on the building scale ordinance itself. There were a number of questions that came up, so just very simply, I want to clarify that there is a single method established in the ordinance for calculating the allowable square footage for lots throughout the city. That is based on the square footage of the lot. There are some provisions, some reductions if properties have ravines, but those apply consistently for all single-family homes and for duplexes throughout the community. The ordinance does provide a process by which a property owner can request an exception to the ordinance, a variance. The city code provides that for variances requested for properties within the historic districts or properties that are designated as local landmarks, consideration of those variances are under the purview of the Historic Preservation Commission. That body is charged with making a recommendation, and the City Council is responsible for final action. For properties that are not within a historic district and not a local landmark, the code puts that discussion, that consideration under the purview of the Building Review Board. Again, those recommendations come forward to the City Council. So there is a consistent process. Finally, the ordinance establishes 6 criteria by which building scale variances are to be evaluated. Again, first by the Board or Commission and then by the City Council. Those criteria are consistent whether the variance is being considered by the Historic Preservation Commission or by the Building Review Board. The first of those criteria requires that the proposed project be consistent with the design guidelines, the design standards in the ordinance. That criteria must be met by any request. The code then provides that one of the 5 additional criteria, at least one of the 5 additional criteria must also be met. Those criteria are provided verbatim in your materials, but in general, those require that the proposed additional mass and height of the new structure or the addition be screened from the streetscape, be sited in a manner that minimizes views from the streetscape, not significantly negatively impact neighboring property owners, be generally consistent with the height and mass of surrounding structures on the lot, on the surrounding properties, and generally within the neighborhood. There's a criteria that specifically speaks to properties within historic districts. During discussion of the building scale ordinance, it was recognized that many of the older homes, because of the design, because of earlier subdivisions that occurred in the 30s, 40s, 50s, or later, are already over the allowable square footage based on the ordinance today. The criteria specifically speaks to the fact that properties that that variances for projects that further the purpose of the preservation ordinance, those satisfy one of the criteria. The final criteria has to do with adjacency to open space and whether or not that open space serves to mitigate the appearance and mass of the structure. So that process is clearly laid out in the code. Just very briefly, I'll review the petition before you. This petition was processed consistently with that process that's laid out in the code. The Historic Preservation Commission considered this matter on 2 occasions, heard testimony both in support of and in opposition to this request. For those who may not be familiar with the property, it's located on Westminster, just to the west of Lake Road. This is a closer view. Again, Lake Road, Westminster. This property is part of a larger estate. The larger estate originally took access from Lake Road. This is the property configured as a result of a subdivision in the 1950s. This is a closer view of the property. It's access from Westminster. This is the main structure on the property. This is the garage coach house that is proposed. The structure as proposed does meet zoning setbacks. During the commission's initial discussion of this petition, they found that several criteria were met. Particularly, they found that the height and mass of the structure was consistent with the surrounding properties. They found that the design standards were met. They asked for further information and a more detailed site plan, landscape plan. This landscape plan was presented to the commission the second time this was before them. This is the location of the coach house and the property lines. Significant vegetation is proposed along both property lines. There was also an earlier agreement from some neighboring property owners to allow some plantings to occur on their property as well. At the cost of the petitioners, in the case of one property, there was an agreement to share the cost. In conclusion, the Preservation Commission found that the proposed variance did meet a number of the criteria. They found that it was consistent with the preservation standards, the design standards, that this project furthered the purpose of the preservation ordinance, noting that this significant home currently did not have a garage, and that by adding a structure that was consistent from a design perspective, it was consistent with the preservation ordinance, that vegetation was provided that would mitigate the mass, that the siting was such that it mitigated the mass from the streetscape, and then the height and mass of the structure was compatible with surrounding structures. So you do have a recommendation. The final vote of the Historic Preservation Commission was 6-0, recommending support of the requested variance. If you choose to do so, it will be appropriate to grant final reading of the ordinance.
Thank you, Kathy. Any questions for Kathy while she's up here?
Yeah.
Ken?
One quick question. It's a minor one. If you know, how does this proposed structure compare size-wise to the original coach house, which I realize is no longer on the property because the property became subdivided? But
I don't know specifically how it compares. I believe it is very close in form. It certainly is close in height. The original coach house is located to the north, and I believe that this structure was the original coach house. This was a later addition. There may have been a partial addition to this, but in general, the proposed coach house is relatively the same or a bit smaller than the original coach house.
Kent, did you have a question?
Yeah. Where I'm having a dilemma with this, to put it very plainly, is the type of structure we're discussing, and it's a hybrid. It's a garage, but it's a living space. It's a combination of both, and primary purpose is maybe the thrust that's confusing a lot. If this was just a living space and there was no garage attached to it, could it be constructed in the area that it's being constructed now with the garage underneath it?
If this was
Simply a
a
living
pool
space.
house, which would be considered living space. If it was a studio for a home office, yes, it could be constructed in this location, and it would be consistent with setbacks for detached accessory structures. Accessory structures are structures on property other than the principal structure. What isn't permitted currently by the zoning code is a second separate residential unit. That was part of the discussion Alderman Moore recently led at a community engagement meeting. But if it is a structure, and we have many accessory structures in the community, whether they be pool houses or family rooms, or there's quite extravagant accessory buildings on properties. And yes, if this wasn't a garage, the building scale overage would be greater, because as a garage, there's an allowable 800 square feet for a garage. But yes, if this was simply a coach house, intended for additional living space to support the main house, it could be constructed as cited.
Okay, and that's where I'm getting confused. So basically, if I wanted to add on to my house and it be attached, like the porch area that's being improved in this house is, okay, that's dealing with one set of criteria. If you construct a detached structure, in effect, you can go around the bulk ordinance. Would that be fair to say?
Not around the bulk ordinance.
Different set of criteria that would apply.
Not with respect to the building scale ordinance. If there was if this garage was proposed as an attached garage to the house, different zoning setbacks would apply.
Okay.
An accessory structure is allowed to be closer to the property line than the main residence. Detached structures must be separated from the main structure by at least 10 feet to be considered an accessory structure, a detached structure.
Okay, and is this 10 feet from the main structure?
It is.
Okay, and yeah, again, it's the nature of the structure. It's not a garage, it's living space. Again, it's the central purpose. The one thing that troubles me is I did go through the notes, and given a chance from Alderman Adelman, I did have an opportunity to view the past meetings, and to a degree I was satisfied that there was a discussion on the height and the architectural compatibility with the structure with the existing home, but there really was no exploration as towards having an actual plan for just a garage. Maybe I missed that. There was a conclusion that this was compatible, but there was never really an exploration going towards, could a single story structure be compatible on an architectural basis?
At the first Historic Preservation Commission meeting, the petitioner's representative did review briefly, but did discuss consideration that was given to alternative sightings. They talked about siting a garage between the main residence and Westminster. They talked about siting the garage on the east side of the house, which would be the more formal side of the house. And they also were presented with a study drawing of of simply a garage without the increased height to relate to the
Yeah, and I'm not talking
to the
about
main
the
house.
siding. The siding's not what I'm involved in, but I'm talking about serious discussion of a single story structure. It seems to be touched on, but not delved into to determine compatibility.
That's from the first
Yeah.
package.
Well, again, I've seen that, but it doesn't seem to be a serious plan. It just seems to be a photo and a conclusion. I don't know, I wasn't.
The commission responded, recognizing or responded with the comment that the structure as designed with the massing and the height did relate well to the really quite unusual main residence. So they did have a discussion. You're correct, they didn't spend extensive time, but they really accepted the design rationale and the design reasoning that went into the study to move the project to the point it was at.
Okay.
Any other questions for Kathy? You know, what I might like to do now, I think there perhaps could be a couple people who would like to make some comments, and then we'll bring it back for final discussion amongst the council. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment about this particular item on the agenda? Come forward, please state your name, sir, and your address.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Tom Hunter. I live at 1090 North Sheridan Road. I am the son of Maxine and Tom Hunter, who live in the house to the left of the structure that's on the slide that's up right now. I think that you've heard from our side pretty much what we have to say. I guess I come back to you with the premise that this is a home that seemingly is getting a separate standard from other homes that come through. I recognize there is the HPC track and there is the other track, but in this particular instance, a house that's on a lot that's allowable is about 7,000 square feet, is currently at a little under 10,000, and it's moving to a 12,000 square foot mass, which is 180% of bulk. At this point, I'd have to say that consideration of neighbors, which would be my parents, while I can't tell you specifically the hardship, but I would say that a 15-foot brick wall with a pitch on a green roof that's probably 5 or 6 feet does affect the view from their home, which actually they've done plantings on their side to screen itself from the historic structure itself. And I would argue that a number of homes in the area have had to do that too, just because it is as large as it is. Unfortunately, it was divided many years ago. Anyway, I guess that I would have to say a 2-car garage, 1 story, probably suits many homes. Suits many homes even over on the east side, some of the large mansions, if you will, that have been here for many years and are historic structures. I would ask the council to remand this back to HPC for review and suggest that maybe an alternative structure be put forth. We just haven't seen something. We're not against a garage. We're 100% for it, just not a garage with a living space on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Anyone else would like to make a comment? Seeing none, any further discussion or questions from council?
I have a, go ahead.
Alderman Adelman?
No, you go.
I just have a comment. I would just like to say, I spent 5 years in HPC, and I understand what they did, and I believe they followed the process properly. But I would like to point out that I think that Lake Forest has benefited by having people like the Hunter family in our town. And it's almost inescapable. I was at Ravinia last Sunday, and it was sponsored by the Hunter family and Lake Forest Symphony and all the other wonderful things that happen here. So I have to tell you that it's really difficult for me to, because I do believe that HPC did the right thing here. I would just like to say that it's remarkably difficult to not find for somebody in my own work, in my own study, for someone who's done so much for our town, and I just wanted to say thank you, even though I'm not going to be voting in your favor. And it just makes it more difficult, and it's because you're just such a wonderful part of Lake Forest. If that, I know it doesn't help it, but I wanted to say that, so.
I'd like to.
Mike?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I'll try and be as brief as possible. First of all, I think we should always give great deference to our boards. I think they all try to do a real meticulous job. They put a lot of time in, they're volunteers. And it's a mistake for us to second guess what their process was. I mean, we get an abbreviated report up here, and so I'm always strongly in favor of giving great deference to our boards, our real estate boards. But there are some times when there are exceptions. In this particular instance, I spent about three plus hours watching the March and the May HPC deliberations. And then I contacted the petitioner through Kathy Cerniak and was allowed to visit the site, and I walked the property. And I also contacted Mr. Hunter, who just spoke, and I visited his property and also the old coach house property to the north. So I got a pretty good on-the-ground lay of the land. After watching those hearings, the conclusion I came to was that the public hearing process worked, admirably so. I think the HPC did a great job. I think a house of this stature deserves a garage. It's not a hardship, and as Kathy's pointed out to us, hardship isn't a criteria anyhow, but a house of this significance and historic stature is meritorious of having a garage. I also agree that with the HPC findings that a single-story garage wouldn't be as harmonious scale-wise as a two-story garage. In the two-story garage that's proposed, to my personal way of thinking, it's a beautiful structure. It's beautiful, and I think it complements the main residence well. And I don't have any problems with our building scale ordinance and the exceptions that we've carved into it for unique situations like this, because I was actively involved in 1999, not sitting up here on a board, but on that side of the fence, when we deliberated at length at the Plan Commission and the City Council a revision to the building scale ordinance in 1999. My problem has nothing to do with the building scale ordinance. HPC did a great job here. They were given a petition and they were told this was an accessory building. And that's where I think it's flawed. I don't know how we could ever construe this to be an accessory building in both the letter or the spirit of the law. And granted, our law isn't the tightest. It's got some ambiguity, as we've seen some other laws of ours that we've had to go back and close holes on. But if you look at the definition of an accessory building may but may not be limited to one or more of the following: a garden house, a private greenhouse, a children's playhouse, a garage, a carport, a shed or other storage building. Nothing in the way of a two-story structure comes to my mind when you look at the definition of an accessory structure. We had a community engagement forum in the spring about coach houses, granny flats, and it was well received. And we've had discussion that we're going to attempt to legislate revisions in our code to provide for the encouragement of coach houses or granny flats. If we permit this to go forward, I think we are constructively creating code for coach houses and telling the community we're going to allow coach houses within 10 feet of your side yard or rear yard setback. It's my feeling this is conveniently characterized as an accessory building to shoehorn a two-story structure in to the corner of this lot with 10-foot setbacks for the side yard and the rear yard, where they should be 20 and 50 feet, where otherwise you couldn't put this building. And so what we're going to do now is say that two-story coach houses are accessory buildings, and I don't think that's in the letter of our definition, and I don't think it's in the spirit of what we intended that exception to side yard and rear yard setbacks to be intended for. I think it was intended to take your pool equipment and put it in a low shed as far away from the house as possible to get it out of sight. To take your kids' log playhouse and stick it back in the corner of your yard, or your garden shed where you stored your fertilizer dropper or your weed whacker and your other garden tools out of sight. And now what we're saying is accessory buildings are two-story structures that we can put right in the face of our neighbors. So I'm not troubled with the building scale ordinance. What troubles me is that we're allowing an exception to the setback requirements by mischaracterizing this as an accessory building. So it would be my preference to remand this to HPC with the instruction either redesign the structure for this location or find a new location for this structure. And I don't know why this structure, which is beautiful and complements the main residence well, couldn't be put on a tangent on the east side of the driveway circle that we're looking at on the monitor here, and it would meet all the requirements. It would tie in visually to the main residence. It would create a courtyard, and I dare say, meeting the requirements for proper setbacks, it could be a 3-car garage instead of a 2-car garage. So that's what troubles me, is the road we're going down. And I mentioned to some of you earlier that we had an issue with a stockade fence on Walden Road, or on Bluff's Edge Road in the ravine. And we issued a permit, we lawfully issued a permit for that fence to go in. And then we scrambled after the community outpouring about that, and we went back and revised our fence code as it pertains to steep slopes and ravines. If there's any ambiguity in our definition of accessory buildings, now's the time to clean it up and not let another horse out of the barn. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'd like to say something.
Go ahead, George.
I think actually in the preamble to the definition of accessory structures, there was a carve-out, something along the lines of may include but is not limited to. I think that's part of what you read.
May, but need not be.
Limited
so may
to.
need, but may need.
I mean, it's not exclusive. That clause is not exclusive.
No, so you can include anything. You can include a riding arena.
Okay. I just wanted to point that out.
So is that the way we want it to read?
But that's not what's in front of us right now.
Well,
so I
that's
guess I have a number of thoughts here. First of all, I think that this is consistent with a long-standing effort going back to, 20 years ago when I first got on the zoning board, and I think it's continued, to provide viable opportunities for residents to preserve and enhance and make livable these historic structures around town, some of which are very substantial, some of which are quite small. But we've consistently tried to make it possible for people to preserve their homes as relevant places to live as the world changes around us. So I think this petition preserves the viability of what is a very historic structure. There was a unanimous approval by the Historic Preservation Commission after 2 separate considerations. The standards of the code for a variance to the building scale ordinance are met. The homeowners have committed to expend significant dollars, first of all, to make it historically sensitive and to integrate with their existing home. Secondly, to shield it from the neighbors, even to the extent of paying for landscape enhancements on other people's property. And 3, to cooperate with the neighbors significantly. And there's lots of information in the record about that. Ultimately, one of the neighbors turned out not to be satisfied after having indicated in writing that they were satisfied. This issue was created by the imposition of the bulk ordinance. Shame on the city for allowing a subdivision that didn't have a garage and didn't have enough, didn't have the right configuration. But that was all done before we had a bulk ordinance. And that's a very consistent theme throughout, certainly my history, going back to the zoning board and the plan commission and now the city council, where the code creates a problem, we try to find solutions, constructive solutions. I mean, in this case, literally putting up a doghouse would probably require a bulk ordinance variation, simply because the house, as the lot was drawn and then the bulk ordinance was superimposed on it, doesn't conform. That's what created the nonconformity. It's really not this petition that created the nonconformity. And I think in a broader sense, we really need to kind of respect the priority of the property owners to sensitively improve their property. This is what's in front of us. I think we need to make an up or down vote, and I'm in favor of it.
Alderman Tack?
My only comments on this relate to the perceptions of people who don't live in historic properties, and that is that these historic properties, that the non-historic homeowners are subject to very arbitrary mathematical formulae, whereas the historic properties are really subject more to architectural opinions about things. And there doesn't seem to have been any effort to apply mathematical analyses to their properties in a very arbitrary fashion. So many people view this as being a very unfair circumstance, understanding that these are unique properties, their historic architecture is extremely important, but other homeowners feel the same way about their properties, and this dichotomy in how we treat them is very disturbing to many people. When I look at this and I see that there wasn't really a serious attempt at a design for a structure that would have fit within the bulk ordinance, meaning essentially a garage only. I mean, there was some brief discussion of it, but there was no serious architectural plan presented and rejected by the Historic Preservation Committee because they simply thought, hey, even though this fits, we don't think the architecture fits, and we couldn't possibly go along with this. I realize it's a burden to people with historic preservation, but I own an old Jaguar. I understand the burden of owning historic things. You spend a lot of money just to sort of keep them alive. My perception on whether this is a good project, bad project, whether the hunters are being somewhat abused by this, or whether we should give great deference or complete deference to the architecture of this is somewhat irrelevant. I just wanted to express the opinion of what I hear from other people who say, I don't like the fact that we don't really have a bulk ordinance for historic properties. It's there, but it's pretty much neglected, out of respect for this architectural significance.
Any other comments? Alderman Reisenberg?
I could regurgitate what Alderman Pandaleon said, but I'll just say I agree with him 100%.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, there is a recommendation from staff that grant final approval of the ordinance. If there are no other comments, I might ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Roll call vote. Biddy?
Alderman Novit.
No.
Alderman Waldeck.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman Pandaleon.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
No.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Palmer.
Aye.
Alderman Adelman.
No.
5-3, motion carries.
Motion approved. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 4 of the City Code regarding liquor licenses. Vic, could we ask you to weigh in on that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Before you is an ordinance that addresses one oversight in the recent amendment that you passed on the liquor code, and also addresses a couple of changes with respect to license categories that have come up as we've implemented the ordinance. In the overall amendment that you did back in May, the change included an opportunity for wine tastings, and there was a specific provision in the code which was addressed to allow that. Unfortunately, there was an oversight in catching one other provision that also had a limitation, so we're coming back here to correct that at this time. The other respects the license categories of two different former licensees, or one current licensee, one now former. Authentico had two different types of licenses. They've elected to modify one of their license categories, which limits their ability to sell, and so we're suggesting that we change the numbers of licenses to reflect their desire. The other one relates to the Eloa Foundation, which has had a license in the past and no longer looks to keep it, and so we're reducing that. Again, philosophically, we've always had the city try to keep the number of licenses consistent with the number of licensees so that there would be greater ability for the council to review and evaluate whether another license should be granted beyond the pre-existing license holders. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, but that is the sum and substance of the ordinance before you tonight.
Questions for Vic?
So if the mayor wants to grant another license, he has to come back to us?
That is correct.
So what's the purpose of giving him discretion in the first place if it always comes back to us?
The discretion is as to the number of licenses. Once the license exists, he doesn't have to grant it if someone does not meet the criteria. He also has discretion in terms of what conditions might be imposed on a license.
Well, I mean, if we have agreed, let's say the Eloa Farm, we have a certain number of licenses out there, why would we retire one? Why wouldn't we? I think our position is to say, how many liquor licenses do we want in this city, not to do it on a case-by-case basis, because that's the mayor's prerogative. And if we don't like what the mayor's doing, then of course we can change it. But I think to come back to us each time defeats the purpose of giving him discretion.
And certainly it's a policy issue. I can only tell you that up until right now, the council's never had that discussion because the other reason was that they didn't want to put the liquor commissioner, i.e. mayor, in a position where someone could show up and say, you have an open license, I want you to give it to me, and then puts him in a bind or puts the burden on him to prove why they shouldn't have it. And by not having even one available, then the argument can't, they can't come in and force that issue without coming in and proving to the city council that it's in the best interest of the community to have that additional license. Having said all that, if the council wants to move in a different direction and have more licenses available, it just gives more discretion to the liquor commissioner than it has in the past.
What does the liquor commissioner, AKA the mayor, feel about this?
You know, I would tend to side with Bob's comment a little bit, Bob, to be honest with you.
I mean, I would say if you come back to us and you say, I would like a license, it's pretty much automatic that we would say yes. We're not going to get into this whole discussion again.
Right.
But the idea is you're the one that has discretion. I can see reasons why, yeah, you bring it back to us, but I think we should have an understanding that that's not to go over everything again.
Right.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? If not, I might ask for a motion to approve. Waive first reading and grant final approval.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Then we need a motion to approve.
Yep. And we need a motion for final approval.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
And roll call vote?
Alderman Novit.
Aye.
Alderman Waldeck.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman Pandaleon.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Palmer.
Aye.
Alderman Adelman.
Aye.
8 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you, Betty, very much. Next item on the agenda, consideration of request for a liquor license for the Shell Station located at 193 East Deer Path. A motion, if desired by the City Council, directing preparation of an ordinance adding a liquor license. And Kathy Cerniak, want to make a couple
Oh,
comments?
we have an extra one, right?
Yeah.
I'm just,
That's just great.
That's funny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I am going to introduce this item, but then I'm going to invite up the owner of the Shell station, Mr. Lombardius, and Police Chief Jim Held to also offer comments. Several city council meetings ago, when you were talking about liquor licenses, you made a change to the liquor code to eliminate the prohibition on gas stations having liquor licenses. After you did that, to simply allow the opportunity for a gas station owner to apply for a liquor license, at your direction, we did meet with Mr. Lombardius, staff from City Hall, the police chief, and community development staff. We met with him on a number of occasions, had further conversations, and really talked through with him exactly what he had planned for the Shell station, which is kitty corner from City Hall. After those discussions, Mr. Lombardius did meet with the deputy city clerk and submit an application for a liquor license. With that information, we asked for him to submit other information, which you have in your packet, including a business plan, proposals for security, a floor plan that indicates where the liquor would be located in the store. And we felt that at this point we have adequate information from him that really describes his whole plan for the Shell station. He does intend to do some upgradings. We have some applications from him pending that will be processed depending on your actions for improved lighting, alterations in lighting, some changes in signing, some tree removal, and some landscaping. So the owner is really looking at some whole-scale changes to the Shell station. City staff did not feel it was appropriate for us to offer you a recommendation on whether or not a liquor license should be granted. However, what we did do is, if the council chooses to move forward with recommending that a liquor license be granted, we did present you with 7 suggested conditions of approval that have to do with assuring that the location of the alcohol in the store is in an area that is unobstructed, that is in clear view of the employees in the store. Those conditions speak to having security cameras and assuring those security cameras are operational. They speak to only allowing the sale of beer and wine. Currently, the liquor license that is applied for is for beer, wine, and spirits, which would be a full liquor license. Would not allow consumption on the property, and other conditions that speak to other improvements on the site. We do recommend that if you choose to move forward with a liquor license, that this not be a 24-hour opportunity to sell. The hours we suggested is that liquor sales will be limited from 10 a.m. to midnight. So with that, I believe that Mr. Lombardius would like to make some comments to you. I also know that Chief Held is available and has been very involved in this discussion. But before I do that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
I have a point.
Kathy, do your recommendations speak to signage? Most gas stations that I've driven by that sell liquor have lit signs in the window with words to the effect of cold beer, lotto tickets, and posters often of beer in the windows. And I'm just wondering if was any discussion. There may have been, and I just didn't remember.
The recommended condition does speak to any improvements, which would include lighting and signage, going through the standard review process and permitting process. And currently, the city's sign ordinance would not allow those kinds of signs. In fact, there are some signs there now that we would hope to clean up and bring into conformance with the ordinance through working with the owner.
I have a point. It's a point of order. I don't think this is appropriate. I don't think it's ripe for our decision based on what we just said. This goes through the liquor commissioner. The liquor commissioner can decide what conditions to impose. Then it's like just going through one of the subsidiary boards, historic preservation, except it's the liquor commissioner. And then it comes back to us, and if we have any questions, we can do it. But the hard lifting has to be done by the liquor commissioner, and then it just comes to us for, I would think, pretty much pro forma approval. But we're not going to get back into the condition of giving these licenses out. That's the liquor commissioner's prerogative.
We certainly did have that discussion and talk that through with the city attorney. We believe we heard direction from the city council on this specific request a couple months ago that you wanted more information, and the council wouldn't be acting tonight to approve a liquor license, but instead your action would simply direct staff and the city attorney to prepare, one, an ordinance amending the city code to make an additional liquor license available, and two, a proposed license for issuance to the Shell station. So with your direction, we would have those prepared. It would then be at the discretion of the liquor commissioners to bring it back to the city council. And if I've mischaracterized that, I look to the city attorney to...
Can I move to table this and let the liquor commissioner have a shot at it before it comes back to us?
Certainly, the council doesn't have to discuss this. I think that the objective of the staff, in light of some of the earlier council discussion about the sale of liquor at service stations, was that you all wanted to have a further discussion. And I think it was the staff's belief that in order to help you have that discussion, sort of know what you're getting into, and that's why the conditions have been outlined as recommended by staff. Ultimately, the action that the council would take, if any, would be to amend the code to allow a liquor license of one of the applicable categories to be available. Then the mayor, as liquor commissioner, would be the one to issue the license and impose whatever conditions he believes are appropriate. Again, I think the staff recommendation is, or the staff presentation is here, that if you are looking at it, they wanted to make sure you had at least the benefit of their assessment of what should be included as conditions, both as a matter of recommendation, if you will, to the mayor as liquor commissioner, but also as a matter of understanding for the council itself, so you, again, knew what you're getting into if you're going to vote for it. But you don't have to do anything like that. It can simply be presented on an agenda, and you can decide whether or not to act on it.
We were just given a reason why we didn't want to create a license that the mayor hadn't requested us to. I would say it's back in the mayor's lap. I mean, he can kill this and it never comes back to us.
Yeah, here's what I would suggest. Bob, I hear you, and I don't disagree with your comment. I think, given the amount of discussion we had about it a couple months ago, I think it's appropriate, and given the amount of work and time that's been spent, I would like in this forum to hear from the owner, just make comments, and I would like to hear Chief Held's comment. And then I'm fine with going back and taking these recommendations and taking a look at crafting something to bring back to council. But I think it's prudent, given the importance of what I think is the importance of this discussion, and really kind of the unique nature of this, that at least I think it'd be prudent for the council to hear it.
Well, I think we could hear it after you'd made your decision. If you want to do it now, fine, but if you're going to come back to us then and say, you know, it was nice you listened to this, but my recommendation is you don't do anything, then we won't do anything.
I understand. I just think the owner's here. I'd like to give him the opportunity to just briefly address the council.
You're the liquor commissioner.
Yep. So, sir, would you like to come up?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and everyone. My name is Bill Lombardius. I am the owner of the Shell Station located at 193 East Deer Path. You have all the paperwork in front of my hopes of obtaining this A1 liquor license. I've met on numerous occasions with city staff along with the police department, Chief Held, and understand fully what's needed in obtaining this license and the proper security measures, placement of liquor, the sale of it, the ID checking, and so forth, in hopefully getting this license. It's important from my business standpoint. The customers keep asking for it, and along with my other plans of doing a full remodel inside the store with new counters, cabinets, racks, graphics, and so forth. But the liquor license is pretty much crucial at this point on a business level, sales being down. And we have the proper area for the liquor, the cooler space, which is closest to the cashiers. I've been there for 10 years and plan to be there for a very long time. My staff are trained for this license if we obtain it, let alone with the tobacco, how we handle that and so forth. So this is very important to me and satisfying a lot of the local residents that always constantly ask for it. So,
Mr. Lombardi, could I ask you a question? Have you seen these recommendations that staff have given us?
yes,
And are you comfortable with all those?
yes. We've met on numerous times, and I understand the position and the concerns, and it's perfectly fine.
Any other questions for?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to jump in. Why not? We've been through discussion before. The one thing I am a little sensitive on is, as I look around the town of Lake Forest, I think the grocery stores generally are closed at 10 o'clock. So if we allow them to basically serve beer till 12, it's the one stop in town to go to late at night if you want a beer. I'd kind of hope to create a little level playing field, possibly if we could have the liquor license or package liquor, be 10 o'clock or consistent with the other establishments that serve alcohol. Yeah, I just don't want to have a rush of people going late at night to get beer at the one spot in Lake Forest. Just my thought.
And I've just an very off-the-cuff observation. I understand the owner's comments about how this is necessary for him from a business standpoint. I'm not sure whether it's our job on city council to, certainly we're sensitive and we like to promote local businesses. I'm not quite sure if it's, if that's really our purview. But I suppose my other observation would be that what we do for one gas station, we must do for all. And I would expect that the other gas station in town would be quickly coming on the heels of this petition.
Then
asking for their own
Kent's problem would go away.
liquor license.
Yeah. Or we'd want to limit that one also.
I guess I'm not so sure as he is that he'd be carving a niche for himself.
Yeah, understand.
Just an observation.
I have no problem with going back, taking a look at this, reviewing it with staff. I'd like to have a conversation with Chief Held and then decide if we're going to bring it to the council for consideration.
I have just a technical question to follow up with Kent's if I could. The other people that sell packaged liquor, do they choose to close at 10? Or do they have to stop selling packaged liquor at 10? And I don't need an answer, but maybe it's something that we should think about.
Yeah.
Because if it's their choice to close at 10, and they can sell till midnight, then it's a different.
We do prescribe hours of operation in the code. I will admit that I don't remember what those are offhand. So that would be.
We had that once, different hours. I remember seeing it here.
Yeah, and there, I believe there still are different hours for different types of licenses, and that's why I wouldn't be comfortable
There should be
trying to
some
tell you what it
equity.
would be.
And I also know, that we've already to some extent had this conversation, and I realize I may be repeating myself, but I'm going to say it again. I think there is a big difference between this establishment or any sort of a mini-mart / gas station and other places in town that sell liquor. And that includes the Jewel, the Walgreens, the CVS, that includes places like Costco. To my mind, there is a difference. It's a convenience store. You go there because it's convenient. You don't go there at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night to buy milk because they have the cheapest milk. You go there because it's 11 o'clock at night and you need milk. And there's, in my mind, a difference between, and that's why I oppose gas stations selling liquor. I also, think that there's really a character issue, that it speaks to the character of our community, and I don't want to see, I I personally don't want to see people purchasing beer across the street from this building. So that's my thought. And I would be interested in hearing what Chief Hells has to say on the matter too, as long as we've heard from the owner.
Could we ask just briefly Chief Hell to come up?
Hello. I really have nothing original, I guess, to say on this. I'm just going to echo what Andy Duran said before you guys. I think it was back in May. Andy Duran is director of LEAD and Speak Up, and we're big supporters of LEAD and Speak Up. And he did give a very short presentation to you on this very topic, and it has to do with accessibility. And obviously LEAD, Speak Up, they're against alcohol, drugs, and their feeling is that any extra alcohol available in the city it's accessible to underage drinking. I know that Bill here has gone to great lengths and met with some of our requirements. It still will be accessible. Those are my things. I just think that another place with accessible alcohol, we know that kids frequent it from Deer Path Middle School, from St. Mary's School, from the high school, from the college. So it is another avenue for availability of alcohol. That's pretty much our point out. We do support the LEAD and Speak Up in their efforts to not have something like this.
Thanks, Chief. We'll go back, take a look at it, and then come back to the council.
If I can just make one counterpoint to that, and I respect the chief's position and Kathy Waldeck's position. I don't think selling liquor out of the gas station is going to make it easy for the kids at Deer Path. They're going to have to steal it. They cannot lawfully purchase it. It is so much easier for the kids to help themselves at home to their parents' liquor, and that's the problem we have in this town because it's rampant. It's really rampant. So I don't think we should confuse the issue of a liquor license being sold lawfully to a merchant in town with kids unlawfully drinking.
May I comment, or would you rather have me lobby you separately?
I'm sure it'll happen.
Yeah, it happen both ways. I agree with Kathy. I don't know that I'll get any buyers here in terms of the character issue, but I don't think it fits the character of Wake Forest. Like the chief, it concerns me that it's very near St. Mary's and the middle school. Way too near. Regarding the thing about I was a kid a long time ago, and my recollection that stealing beer from a store was not a felony; it was a sport. So I just don't. I think it's the wrong place to grant a liquor license, compounded by the fact that I've never felt that alcohol and gasoline mix. Thank you.
Unless anybody else wants to jump in, I think we're going to keep going because we do have some agenda. Bill, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, comments by council members. We are going to spend a few minutes, and before we do that, before we go and have a little discussion about some long-range planning issues on the finance side, that I'd ask Elizabeth to come up and join us. Any other comments other than that by council members?
Can we adjourn for 5 minutes?
Sure. We'll take a 5-minute break.
Great.
Good thought.
So, come on. You're the man.
How cool it is.
You're the man.
How many city councils, everybody agreed to everything too.
I think you should.
Triple.
This is neat.
Quadruple.
Well, otherwise we're.
All right, welcome. We are back in session. And the next item on the agenda is under comments by council members, long-term financial planning. Elizabeth Hollab is going to make a presentation, and I think what we're going to do, due to the lateness of the hour and the importance of this, is I've asked Elizabeth to kind of hit the highlights. There are a couple things she's going to specifically focus on, one particular item that needs to be addressed rather quickly. But this is far too important an item for us to really begin to tackle at 9 o'clock at night after sitting here for 2.5 hours. So I've asked Elizabeth to give us some highlights, let us know where we're focused. I think it warrants a great deal of discussion amongst the council with Elizabeth, and then we'll bring it back for a future session. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Good evening. I want to start out by saying that the city is in excellent financial condition currently. Nothing presented this evening or ongoing is intended to give anybody any different impression. The city has a balanced budget for the current fiscal year. The city has very healthy fund balance reserves. The city has a AAA bond rating from Moody's Investors Service that was reaffirmed as recently as 2011. And all of those speak to the excellent job that the elected officials and staff are doing in addressing the finances of the city. The city is extremely proactive in dealing with its finances. Not only do we do an annual budget, but we do a 5-year forecast each year that's updated each year as part of the budget process. That 5-year forecast gives us a long-range look at decisions being made this year and how that might impact the finances going forward. And that is really why we're here and doing this presentation. The forecast prepared as part of the fiscal year 14 budget process identified 2 issues in the future that could present challenges, one in the general fund and one in the capital improvement fund. And so in discussions with the mayor, the finance committee chairman, and the city manager, we felt it would be prudent for the city council to begin deliberations on some of those issues in advance of the fiscal year 15 budget preparation process beginning. So in deference of the time, as the mayor said, I will flip through some of these slides, just give you an overview with the expectation that a detailed presentation will follow at a later date. First of all, in 2012, the city did complete a strategic planning process. There were 3 overarching objectives identified under the fiscal stewardship category. And so we are tying our budget now to that strategic plan and the objectives that we are looking towards and action items related to these 3 objectives in the future. That just summarizes the overview that I provided at the beginning. The first issue, as mentioned, relates to the 5-year fund balance forecast. This is the 5-year forecast identified and presented in March for the fiscal year 14 budget discussion. And as you can see, this line item here, net before CIP, is really the results of operations in the general fund, which is the primary operating fund of the city. As you can see, in fiscal year 17 and 18, as identified and highlighted, we are projecting an operating deficit in those funds that would require and necessitate budget adjustments. I would note, however, that our 5-year forecasting model does use conservative assumptions, and so we do that to ensure that we're looking at the most conservative, so revenues are projected very conservatively, and operating expenses are shown with full funding for all personnel when we know that staffing vacancies will generate savings throughout the year, each year. The primary issue that is affecting us is that revenue growth, operating revenue increases annually are projected to be outpaced by expenditure growth. That is not a phenomenon in Lake Forest, it's happening everywhere. And that is driven primarily by personnel cost increases. And the next slide shows the detailed payroll forecast for the general fund, which shows some of the drivers of that down here below, which is related to pensions and insurance costs for employees. The city has been proactive in looking at options to reduce personnel costs over time. We've looked at this chart before. This is the number of city employees per 100 households, and you can see that since fiscal year 1992, The city has made a concerted effort to reduce personnel while maintaining service levels. The other issue identified is related to the Capital Improvement Fund. The Capital Improvement Fund is used to account for the majority of capital improvement needs, capital project needs in the city's budget. There are some exceptions to that, but the majority of things such as streets, sanitary sewers, storm sewers, capital equipment replacement, and fleet are found in this fund. Our 5-year forecast, based on current revenue projections, indicate that we have about $3.5 million available to us annually to fund expenditures in the Capital Improvement Fund. The next slide shows the funding analysis based on capital improvement needs that have been identified in Planet. Planet is the software application the city uses to track its individual projects slated in the 5-year capital improvement program. As you can see at the top, we show funding available in each of those years with the $3.5 million provided in the out years. And then you have the capital improvement needs identified by category. First, we have priority 1. Those funded by the 0.5% sales tax transfer from excess fund balance reserves there, grant funding that is anticipated or already awarded in 14 and 15, and then you have capital improvement programs, priority 2 and priority 3, which are not budgeted in those years. Fire engines, which were put on hold while the fire services study was done with the other agencies, and that has been slated previously for bond issue funding, so that is again not budgeted. And then we have a stormwater study currently ongoing, and the results of that have not yet been identified, but those recommended projects have yet to be included. So you can see the funding shortfalls, and so we've identified some challenges in our CIP funding in future years. We have other capital funding sources available. I won't go into these this evening, but there are funding sources available in other funds that do handle a portion of the capital improvement requirements. I will hold off on this for a later discussion. And then what we did was separated this between revenues and expenditures. And I'm going to just, I think this warrants a lot of discussion at a later date. So I'm just going to provide a brief summary just to give you slight exposure to this section. This is a summary of general fund revenues. It provides the fiscal year 14 budget of that source, the percentage that revenue source represents of the total general fund revenues, and then what our forecast growth assumptions are for that revenue source for the next 4 years. And you can see that the top 4 revenue sources in the general fund account for nearly 80% of the total general fund revenue. And you can see that those have very modest growth assumptions going forward and some challenges presented in each of them.
I have a question on the sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
I assume when you have 2% growth a year, it's 2% of 8.75%, not 2% on top. It won't be 10.75%. 12.75%.
That's correct.
Okay.
So what we're projecting is the 2.78 million in 14 will grow by 2% in the next year and then by 2%. So we provided some basic overview on property taxes. We've taken these in order of the top 4 revenue sources, showing the allocation of the city's property taxes, and the fact that although the city is a home rule community, it is not legislatively subject to tax cap legislation at the state level. However, Lake Forest has self-imposed the tax cap and therefore limit growth in the current this revenue source consistent with non-home rule communities. This is just a chart that depicts the average tax bill in Lake Forest and the taxing agencies that receive revenues from those tax dollars, and shows that the city of Lake Forest represents this year just under 20% of the total tax bill. This depicts the changing property tax allocation. So what we did was look at 10 years ago compared to this year. The primary observation here is that the allocation of property taxes for the city's portion, the 19.7%, has shifted over 10 years. from debt service, which represented 15% 10 years ago, to 7% now, to pension costs, which represented 11% 10 years ago and now consume 18% of the total property taxes. This is a great slide. It warrants a lot of discussion. I will hold off, but I think the very important part here is that using the 13 comparable communities that we typically use for other analyses in the city, this year, Lake Forest total tax bill is the lowest of those 14 communities overall. So that is a great positive for property owners in the city. Utility taxes represent the number 2. That is combined 4 different utilities: electricity, gas, water, and telecommunications. You can see what those budget amounts are for fiscal year 14. The city is currently at the maximum rate authorized by the state for each of these. And the point here is that electricity, gas, and weather is significantly impacted by weather. We can use some historical averages to project those in the 5-year forecast, but from year to year, those budget amounts are going to fluctuate depending on weather conditions.
Quick question.
Mm-hmm.
By doing this electrical aggregation, we reduced our cost of electrical consumption, so did that drive our utility taxes for electricity down?
Actually, fortunately, it did not, because in electricity, the rate of the utility tax is actually based on consumption, so it's cents per kilowatt hour. So by reducing the rate, because it's not revenue driven, it doesn't negatively impact the city's utility tax revenue. Telecommunications has been declining overall. This is happening from municipality to municipality as people reduce landlines and just go simply to their cell phone in their homes, or they go to other internet technologies, voice over IP. That revenue is dropping off. Sales taxes are the number 3 highest revenue source in the general fund. The graph here just shows in 2012 the sales tax by category, reporting category. This is provided by the Illinois Department of Revenue. It shows that the category of food is the highest proportion of sales tax generated in Lake Forest. Only modest growth in sales taxes is currently projected, as we saw in an earlier slide. I would note that the Marketplace Fairness Act remains in play. It is facing considerable scrutiny in the House. It was passed by the Senate in May, and this is intended to level the playing field between brick and mortar retail establishments and internet sellers and impose a sales tax on internet sales. That would potentially increase sales tax revenues for the state and the city. The city continues economic development efforts to enhance sales tax revenues, and just to note that, of course, the city's $2.5 million noted above does include the 0.5% home rule sales tax, which accounts for $600,000 of that $2.5 million. Income tax is number 4. Fiscal year 14 budget of $1.7 million represents about 5% of the total general fund budgeted revenue. It's distributed by the state of Illinois. You will recall a few years ago when they did increase the income tax rate, they in conjunction reduced the percentage share to municipalities from 10% to 6%. By the state's council was to hold harmless the municipalities, but what it basically did was just keep us at our current revenue levels and not share any of the increased revenues from the income tax increase with municipal governments. We have experienced delays by the state in distributing income tax revenues. That delay has ranged between 2 and 5 months, depending on their cash flow issues. So we track that monthly in our report to the Finance Committee, the flash report. It is important to note, however, that the General Assembly has approved a current fiscal year budget that leaves intact the current share of income tax collections to municipalities, but it will continue to be an item in play. I will hold off on this, but we were asked to present some alternative revenues that other home rule communities are using, and I'll hold off on that for further discussion at a later meeting, and go to the more time-sensitive issue, which is related to bond financing. And I'll skip this one and go straight to the municipal services building, because we've We've had some discussion with the city council about refinancing a portion of the bonds associated with the MS building construction. The construction budget anticipated $13 million from proceeds on the Laurel Avenue site, the site of the old MS building. In 2010, bonds were issued due to national economic conditions resulting in a delay in the redevelopment of that property site. $9.7 million was issued that is due in a single principal payment with interest on December 2015. And the remaining $3 million is due in 2029 through 2032 and has an interest rate subsidy from the federal government. Those were issued under the Economic Stimulus Act. The question has been posed as to whether or not the city would benefit from refinancing the issue that is due in December 2015. There are some stars aligning, and so we broached this initially in April with the PPL committee and again with the Finance Committee in July. Some of those issues are that because the city is not issuing any other debt in 2013, the refinancing could be accomplished with bank qualified status, which provides a slightly lower interest rate because you're under $10 million in the calendar year. The first opportunity for the issue to be refunded comes September 15th, 2013, without jeopardizing the single opportunity to advance refund before a call date. So this really adds greater flexibility to the city because the refunding issue would still allow for an advance refunding if Laurel Avenue is redeveloped or other revenues come in that allow for those bonds to be paid off earlier.
So how long do we have to keep it? How long does it season before you can, if we sell Laurel, I guess is the question.
Yeah, an advance refunding option exists once on a particular issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so had you refinanced this prior to September 15th, you would have had used that advance refunding option and it would not extend to the refunding bonds. If you refinance after September 16th, you would still have that advance refunding option, so you could refund that issue at any time, right, prior to the call date, which would probably be 8 to 10 years from the date of issue. So it would give you that flexibility to pay those bonds off earlier should the opportunity present itself. This refinancing would also provide added flexibility in redeveloping the Laurel Avenue property because we would not have that single payment due in December 2015. It would probably provide for level principal and interest payments over the life of the refunding bond issue. This chart was originally presented to the PPL committee in April. It was also provided in the July Finance Committee packet. It is intended to demonstrate that both a 2013 refunding of the MS bonds and the projected $4.8 million new issue in 2014, which is in the 5-year plan for the Capital Improvement Fund, can be accomplished staying under the city's debt service cap of just under $2.6 million per year, and still staying within the city's goal of keeping all debt within 20 years. However, the unfortunate part is that this was in April, and increases in bond rates have been noticed since April. And this chart demonstrates in a single month between May 20th and June 21st, bond market rates on 20-year AAA municipal bonds increased by a full percentage point from 267 to 369. In this single week, between June 14th and June 21st, they went up by nearly 50 basis points, due primarily to a statement on June 14th by the Detroit emergency manager that they would have a moratorium on bond payments, including GO-bonded debt. Subsequent to this, of course, we know that Detroit has filed for bankruptcy protection, and the bond market is still adjusting to that news and is still trying to figure out what the long-term implications are going to be on interest rates.
Elizabeth, just sorry to interrupt, but what is the rate on the existing bonds on Laurel Avenue?
Great question. Off the top of my head, it's under 3%.
So we're going to be refinancing to a higher rate.
Yes,
If we were to
potentially.
refinance early, we would be refinancing to a higher rate.
Right.
Question is, would we be refinancing to a even higher rate if we wait another 2 years?
Absolutely.
Probably likely.
Right.
The other question I had about that is, would we be able to refinance the full 9.7 million?
In the current
Whenever,
year.
as soon as it became possible in September.
Yes,
So we would, but at,
but at a higher
At a-
interest rate going forward, yes.
and maybe even a premium rate. I mean, would we, these are secured by the property?
No, it's secured by the full faith and credit of the city, so the property taxing
Get
authority
the full
of the city.
benefit of the AAA credit rating?
Yes.
Okay.
So what we did was change this graph. There's a few changes. This was done on July 22nd based on current interest rate assumptions. So we used a 3.855 net interest cost and did the same chart. Now, what I did do was added 5 years of historical information. I think that's important to give you an idea of where you were at prior to the 2011 refinancing. And in 2011, you took advantage of bond market conditions, refinanced a great deal of city debt at a significant decrease in property taxes. We sit in this trough right here. And then the blue and green, again, show projected debt service payments using the higher interest rate assumption. It now takes you completely up to the cap in years 2019 through 2031. And it extends the debt service on the new money issue in 2014 by 1 additional year, but still keeps you under the 20 years. But it does take you up to the cap and extends out 1 year due to the higher interest rate. What this does not predict is proceeds on the Laurel Avenue site that might be used to reduce this debt and increase that debt capacity over time when those funds are available. So if it's acceptable to the council, I think I would pause there and just say that that is probably the most time-sensitive issue. We currently have the refinancing scheduled to go to market on September 16th to present the bids to the city council at the finance committee and city council meeting that evening for approval. Unless there is a desire of the city council to ask Spear Financial and bond counsel to hold off, and right now we have them drafting the official statement and the bond ordinance, but we could pull back if that is the desire of the city council to wait.
I have a question on technique. I thought Mr. McKenna told us that when we issue these bonds, he gets our approval, he goes out to the market, and then there's this 45-minute flurry of bidding that goes on, and he reports back to us what rate we got. So how could we hear rates and then approve? Isn't it kind of a, mechanically, how does it work when we bond?
No, my understanding is that you can indeed cancel that day, but you have to make that decision that evening.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can't have first and second reading because it can't be delayed 2 weeks.
You have a
because of-
day, so you can,
Right.
you can hear it and then either say yes or no, but,
Right.
okay.
And that's how we handled all of our issues in Highland Park as well. So you usually go to auction in the morning, prepare
Approve.
the packets, present them to the council that evening for approval.
Okay. And one more question on an earlier thing, and I know we're not doing questions, but
For you, you're special.
the shortfall on the CIP had no projected grant money, grant revenue.
Right.
Because we have nothing in the play. But if we put something, a placeholder in there that would reflect something, would it solve the CIP problem, or is there a real shortage? Because we are going for grant money every year.
Right. What we've typically done in the 5-year CIP is just include grant revenue for grants that have been applied for, with the hope that it will indeed be awarded. And so we associate that particular project with the grant.
Oh, so it's a wash, so it's still a shortfall.
So it's an in and out,
Okay.
right.
Thanks.
Any other questions of Elizabeth? Questions on the, the questions or clarifications on the bond financing? Elizabeth, let me also clarify. If we were to sell Laurel or a portion of Laurel, we wouldn't take those proceeds to pay down the debt we just refinanced, but we could use those to pay off other debt that would have an impact on our ceiling.
Right.
And is there a penalty for that?
It depends on the call date of the bonds. You'd have to look. Now, there aren't a lot of refunding opportunities because there was such an expansive refinancing in 2011. But there isn't a penalty per se for the advance refunding. It's just that you only have that option once, and so you want to use that option wisely. And so you'd look at what issue best suits that advance refunding, and essentially it's just putting funds in escrow that will over time pay off the debt until the call date, and then you can redeem the remaining bonds. Typically, you're just doing a cost-benefit analysis as to whether or not the interest rate savings is going to warrant the cost of the advance refunding.
And to clarify, this 2.6 million cap was put in place when we became a home rule municipality.
Right.
And to modify that cap, and I'm not saying we are planning to, but to modify that, would that need to go to referendum? Or would the council be able to do it separately?
Vic is saying no.
No, the council established that by ordinance.
Okay.
It is something that the council can change by ordinance.
And I'm not suggesting that, so.
And I understand that, but that would be the mechanism.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions for Elizabeth? This is discussion, I'm sorry.
I'm
Go
sorry, I
ahead,
just
Bob.
want to add one thing. Maybe Elizabeth, you can go to the very last slide or second to last one about the questions for council. Those are, when you have a moment, I would ask that you sort of look at those and start to ponder those, because we tried to identify what we thought were the, 5 very important questions that the council is going to be faced with between here and the end of the year. And we will schedule a time to come back and talk about each of these. But the reality, and I think you'll see it in the materials that Elizabeth has provided you here this evening, is that this is not necessarily a question that needs to be answered right now or today, but decisions you make today are going to have major consequences down the road. And that's what we're trying to do, is just put the city in the best financial position it can be in, both from a revenue standpoint, but also from an expenditure standpoint. Because if you go back to that graph about employees per household, at some point, that has to stop. You just don't have any bodies to do any of the services that you're talking about. And so I think that's really where we have to get a sense from the council, at what point do we have to stop focusing on the expenditure side and focus on the revenue side. So those are things that at night, on the weekend, maybe when you're having a glass of wine, think about these questions, because these will be coming back to you over the course of the next few months for consideration and some kind of action.
And Bob, I'd simply restate that we've had discussions multiple times over the last few months, and it's as you said, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And we have done a tremendous job, I think, looking at the expenditure side. But I think there comes a time when you can only cut so much. And we need to be cognizant and sensitive of that. But I would really encourage the council to spend some time, talk to Elizabeth about it, explore some ideas. I think these are valid topics for discussion and consideration. But it's something that we need to address today, because in the future it's headed our way. And the thing that I think concerns all of us as well is kind of the uncertainty about what's happening at the state level. And not only the possibility, but probably the likelihood of losing some of that revenue over an extended period of time. So it's not a situation that's going to get better with time, and we need to be cognizant and proactive. And I appreciate Elizabeth taking the time to put this together, and I apologize we're not able to have more discussion on it, but it's an opportune chance for me to ask the council to please spend some time on it, and I'd like to bring it back in a relatively short time frame. Jack?
Is there a process to do this? I mean, somehow just showing up at a city council meeting and vomiting forth crazy ideas, and then having just, like a free-for-all, it seems to me that there should be a process, like maybe 2 or 3 people, or as part of a sidebar committee, or, that each individual councilman would meet with and, get feedback on what they're thinking at, and, well, gee, I was also, you know what I mean,
Right.
John? It's just rather than...
Because the Open Meetings Act, start calling
Oh, yeah.
Just
It's
do
our
one,
calling us
yeah,
two,
right.
committee of
Yeah,
two.
well, could be two. Well, yeah.
come on
Yeah,
over.
I think it's worth having the discussion to try to figure that out. We charged Elizabeth 3 or 4 weeks ago when we got together with developing kind of that first list, which is, look, we've taken as much out of the cost side as we can. Let's consider some options for added revenue. Think out of the box. And so that's what we asked her to do, and she came up with some of these ideas. I think we as business people and professionals should be able to start to do the same. But I think it's prudent, Jack, to think about how we can, how we can think about what that process should be. I agree.
To Jack's point, maybe we can have a goal, like, to balance our 5-year budget. I mean, we haven't said that out loud, but is that the,
I think
if that's the goal, then we know we have to raise taxes or cut expenses.
I think, David, it's the goal, and Bob said it also a moment ago, I think it's not only to balance the 5-year budget, but to put ourselves in an ongoing long-term financial strength. Because in long-term, when none of us are sitting up here, I think we all would feel good about making sure that we made good decisions to put ourselves in good financial footing.
One thing that I would point out is that a lot of the driver here is the cost side, and the costs are not entirely within our control. Funding rates for employee pensions are not within our control. So to the extent that the state decides, oh, in addition to capturing more of your revenue that we used to send to you so that we can solve our problems in Springfield, we're also going to increase your pension requirements per employee. And the healthcare, I don't know that we've even considered that, or to what extent the new healthcare law is likely to impact municipal employee costs, but generally the expectation is those costs are going to go up. So we've done a 2.5% kind of level projection going out in the future, but that could vary significantly. So there needs to be and yet we still have a bit of an issue. So there needs to be some serious thought here to putting things right and putting us in a position where we aren't backed up against the wall at any point, in the foreseeable future by something that happens that's outside of our control.
Well, I think, Jack, your comment's a good one. Let's talk a little bit about process and how we get involvement and how we move the ball forward a little bit. Sure. Elizabeth, thank you.
Thank you. And if I could just confirm, we should then continue to proceed with the refinancing.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Next item on the agenda, new business. Any new business to come before the council? Additional items for council discussion? If not, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.